So this is the summary for both chapter 4, or part 4, and part 5. So in part 4, Somerset and Isabel rekindle after 10 years, and they go to a lot of lunches together and catch up, talking about Isabel's kids and life with Gray. And at one lunch, Somerset's eating by himself, and he is shocked to see Larry again, but he looks like a homeless man because he just came from India after a long trip. So he's kind of surprised. But then eventually Somerset, Larry, and Isabel all rekindle and talk about Larry's trip in India, and they just talk about how things are going with each other. And Isabel brings up that Gray has been having headaches, and Larry somehow uses his knowledge from meditation and stuff in India to help cure Gray's headaches, which worked. And then he kind of goes past all that, and then Somerset starts talking about the past when he met this girl named Suzanne Rouvier and her long story. So basically, Suzanne is kind of like a whore almost, you could say, because she just dates all these men for their money and then leaves them. And she ends up meeting Larry after she dumped one of these men, and one of those men was Larry's friend. So she started to get to know Larry, and Larry was a great person to her. And Larry invited Suzanne and her daughter to a vacation, and they started to have feelings for each other, but then Larry left mysteriously. And that pretty much ends part 4. And then part 5 is in the present time. Isabel, Gray, Larry, and Somerset all go to Paris, and they just visit lots of restaurants in downtown, which they call sketchy. And during that time, in one of the restaurants, they found Sophie MacDonald, which, if you don't remember, when Somerset was in Chicago, he met one of Isabel's friends, who's the skinny girl that's kind of awkward, didn't talk that much. Somerset sat next to Sophie, and they kind of got to know each other, and basically that's the same girl. But in this sketchy restaurant, she's now a drug addict, she's drunk, she's experiencing PTSD and depression from her baby boy and her husband dying in a car crash, and she survived the car crash, so she's obviously distraught, and she became an alcoholic to go through it. And so just time goes by, they go to a lot of lunches and just hang out and have fun. But turns out Larry decides to marry Sophie MacDonald, and Isabel gets very jealous of that, and she even kind of tries to sabotage the marriage. And also Sophie MacDonald realizes that she just wants to be a drunk and go off and do whatever she wants, so she also decided to quit the marriage. So the marriage falls through, and that's kind of the end of that part of the relationship. But then part 5 also talks about how Elliot's getting older and he's really sick. He's just older in his age, but he still puts all his effort into going to all these social interactions, all these parties with the Queen of England, the Duchess of France, and all these high class people. And Somerset keeps telling him, you need to slow down, you're really old. And Elliot doesn't care. He knows that the public opinion for Elliot is decreasing, obviously, because he's old, he can't go to too many parties. So he's trying to make the most of it, but he's getting really tired, and eventually he gets really sick, so he's just bedridden. And there's this big party that this really rich girl hosts, and he really wants to go, but he's super distraught that he wasn't invited. So Somerset actually goes to the house of the girl holding the party, and he steals a invitation and gives it to Elliot to make him feel better, say, hey, you were invited, because at this point in time, Somerset knows that Elliot's going to die soon, so he knows that he's not actually going to the party, but he wants to make him feel good before he dies. And so he's on his deathbed, and they bring in some priests to absolve him of his sins right before he dies, and it works, I guess you could say, but he does eventually end up dying, and that's kind of the end of it. But Elliot dies in front of Somerset and no one else. Isabel and Gray weren't able to get there in time because they were at a vacation just with their kids and just enjoying some time. So that's the end of chapter 5, and we'll see what happens next.